Good day there everyone, and a warm welcome to my channel. My name is Cliff. I'm a gem cutter from Australia, and in today's video I'll be cutting another gem for my wife, which will be a Christmas present. And this particular gem is one of her favourites. It's a garnet, and this particular garnet comes from Madagascar, and it's the type of garnet known as a pyrope garnet. Over the years, I have to admit that I've had a pretty bad history when it comes to faceting garnet, and it's been the type of gem that I've learnt to love to hate, and it's been for a variety of reasons. Often they are too dark, and I suspect that this particular gem may be too dark, or they've had inclusions in them, or they've had magnetite in them. You know, often there's just too many problems associated with garnet. And if you wanted really high quality garnet like Mohenji garnet, you'd probably have to sell your firstborn to be able to afford to buy it. So because my wife does like garnet, I'm still willing to sacrifice all my time and effort into cutting a gem that I know is likely to be problematic. So before I start faceting, I thought I would show you the design. And this design is called Lighthouse by Jeff Graham, and if you do a Google search you would be able to find it, and it's freely available. So just type out Jeff Graham Lighthouse faceting design and you should be able to find it, and you'll see a little link where you can download the actual PDF. Now if you can't find it, then you could probably look at this video and look at the angles and indexes and just follow the schedule. Just write it down on a piece of paper. Now I've decided to use this particular design because it's quite a shallow cut, and I thought it would suit a darker color like garnet, and hopefully more light will pass through it. So if you were to use a stock standard design like a standard round brilliant, where the pavilion facets on the culet were coming in at 42 degrees or 43 degrees, and you had a relatively high crown, you would not get much light transfer through the gem, probably none at all, and the gem would be as useless as a ashtray on a motorbike. And the whole point of when you're faceting, you want to see scintillation. And to get that scintillation, you have to understand that certain gems that are dark need to be cut at shallower angles. Well, that's the whole point. You try to do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I'm hoping that at least I can get some light through this particular garnet using this design by Jeff Graham. I should also mention that this design is suited for a novice. So if you're a beginner and you're new to cutting squares and you haven't cut too many squares, this looks like the type of design that would be right up your alley. Now I haven't cut this design before, this is my first attempt, but nothing looks over complicated about the design. Even the sequencing looks really good, and that is really important, that when you choose a design that the sequencing has been done right, because all too often if you have the wrong sequencing you can strike a few problems. If you're new to faceting, there is one little hint that I could really advise you to use from the time you start, and that's try to learn how to use a very light touch. In point of fact, with a lot of machines, the weight of the quill and the faceting head assembly will almost cut a small gem for you just by the counterweight alone. Now let's have a look at this garnet, and of course I've hit a inclusion, and you can just see the final remnants of that inclusion. Really important that you cut through that, take it all out. Don't try to save material by trying to polishing it out, it won't work. Now here I've used an 800 grit lap. The previous lap was a 600 grit topper lap, and it's a lot smoother. So the next step is to cut the girdle outline. When you're cutting a girdle outline on the square, you need to be deadly accurate that each side is cut down to the right depth and each side measures exactly the same. You'll notice that I'm using an extremely light touch, and I'm using the counterweight of the quill, and you'll notice that I'm literally taking my hand almost off the quill. That's how lightly I'm holding it. If you don't cut the sides of the girdle facets of a square to equal length and width, When you go to do the rotation and start faceting the crown, you'll find that as you're cutting towards the table, the meet points will not quite align, and what you'll be doing is cheating left or right or up and down to try to get those meet points to match up, and you'll find that you'll be in a lot of strife. So if you can get this section of the gem done perfectly, the rest will be a lot easier. So the next step in the process is to do the pre-polish. Now this is going to be a really important step, and hear me out on this. If you're a beginner, this is something that will save you a lot of time and effort. So I'm going to do a pre-polish using a copper lap, using 1 drop of sewing machine oil, and then I'll be dabbing in 8000 grit diamond powder onto the lap. I'm going to use a fair bit of it. Some people might think I'm using too much, but the facets on this particular design, even though the size of the gem is only 7mm by 7mm, but the facet area, or the surface area of the facet, is quite large, and I'll need to pre-polish those facets and get rid of a lot of scratches. The larger the facets are, the more difficult they are to do the final polish on. So you want to make sure that you remove as much of those surface scratches as possible. Also, clean your hands when you're using any form of diamond grit or powder. The next step is to shut down my machine. I've lifted up my head assembly, but I haven't changed the angle on my protractor. The reason why I've lifted the head assembly is because the copper disc is thicker than my last topper lap. And just lightly touching the surface, I'm going to use the grease on the lap to show me where the surface of the facet is touching, and you can see that it's pretty flush. So I'm going to go ahead and start the polish, or do a pre-polish. So here you'll see in this piece of footage that one of the sides of the gem has been pre-polished, and I still need to do a bit more work on it to get it up to a higher pre-polish before I do a final polish. But you'll also notice what dust magnets these garnets are. They pick up every bit of dust. So I've done a really good pre-polish on all the pavilion facets and then the girdle outline, and yes, look at the lint that's picking up from this earbud, or I do believe they call these Q-tips in the USA, but these garnets, by golly, they are just lint magnets. The amount of lint they pick up, really overrated gem just because of this alone, let alone the dark colour. Just look at it. Oh yes, more lint, trying to get rid of it. If it wasn't for my wife loving garnets, and I guess a lot of people love this colour, but for me, I just think they're overrated. A little bit like our Aussie sapphire. If you don't get the light ones, all those dark greens and dark blues, yeah, you just can't see anything through them, and all they do is pick up dust. So here we have the final polish complete, and it's the same process as a pre-polish. I use my tin lap and put in just 1 drop of sewing machine oil and 50,000 grit diamond compound to get this polish. I've done the secondary transfer, and I've used my alignment blocks, and I've got to just take these apart and then I'll start cutting. So I'm ready to start faceting the first set of crown facets on a 600 grit topper lap, and I want you to watch carefully what I'm doing here. The gem is small, and all I'm doing is using the counterweight of the faceting head to cut these facets. Now if your machine is well engineered, and most Australian machines are, made out of really good cast metal, you can do this and it will cut accurately, because you can only cut to depth as far as it will go. But if it's made out of carbon fibre, your machine, or aluminium, I guess the fastening head's just going to float around. So this is what I've cut just using gravity alone, and then I'll move on to my 800 grit topper lap and smooth these facets out, as you can see now. So here we see all the scenes of the crown being cut, and I've got to tell you that this particular design cuts really fast. I faceted this gem off and on in one day in about 3 hours. So we're nearly at the end of this video, and you'll see in the final reveal, yes, we have the final stage of this video where you get to see this gem already mounted in a pendant setting, and it will be a present for my wife. I still think it's a bit on the dark side, and that's why I love to hate garnets. It's just one of those things that garnets are just too dark, I reckon. I will have another video coming up before Christmas, so until then everybody, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.